it were a children's mass, I'd begin by asking why were there 11? Why was it the 11 and not the 12 that went to the mountain for the ascension? Today, I begin just by remembering that someone who's dear to me and who's dear to many of you would often remind us that we are invited into friendship with God. But consider this about friendship. Would you be friends with someone for a long time without ever having asked your friends their name or being told your friend's name? That'd be pretty strange. If you were in a ballroom filled with guests and your only interaction with them was in that crowd of guests, to what extent would you call any of them a friend? If someone is your friend, do you want to learn more about them? Do you want to know what's going on in their life and learn about them? Or do you remain indifferent toward them? And if you mistake your friend for someone else, if you do that once, it'll be something to laugh about from time to time. But if you consistently mistake your friend for someone else, he or she's going to feel hurt. And at some point, they're going to say, "You still don't know me." A lot of that has to do with knowing someone. The part of friendship is coming to a deeper knowledge of the person that we know and love and care about. And I want to use that as an entrance to talk about the most holy Trinity and why that's such a great gift to us. Because again, if you're friends with someone, at some point you're going to learn their name. And our God, we're invited to friendship with God. Our God has a name: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In fact, our readings today show us how God reveals himself to us more and more so that we can live in a true friendship with him. And I mean, what a grace this is. What a grace this is. But to think about it, look back then at our first reading. In our first reading, Moses says, has anyone ever heard of this before? Has anything like this ever happened? And he's referring to God calling the people of Israel into a special relationship with him, into a special friendship with him. And that's an incredible thing, because in one sense, we have more in common with an ant than we do with God. In the sense that God is completely perfect in himself. He doesn't need he has no need for anything. He's the creator and we are a creature. Whereas we need food, we need to take in food each day, we need rest each night. There's a lot of things that we need. We need affirmation from friendship, from our relationships, all those other things that are outside of us, because we are creatures. And in that way, we're more like an ant than like God. And you couldn't even imagine, trying to, sure, you could tell your name to an ant, but you wouldn't expect anything to come of it. And here Moses is saying, our God, our Creator, has revealed himself to us and spoken to us. Has anything ever happened before? Have you ever heard of it? That God would speak to a people as he did to us. And referring to Sinai, when God spoke out of the smoke, the fire, and the cloud. And then Moses goes on and says, has anything ever happened like this? Where God brought a people out from another nation, as he did for us. Where he brought Israel out of Egypt. He ransomed them. He redeemed them. He delivered them. Have we ever seen such a thing? So great is our God. Now, some people really struggle with this idea that God chose Israel. Well, what about all the other nations? What about the people of Egypt? What about the Canaanites? What about those other nations? And I understand their sentiment. It's like, because God does care? Does God care for them? But that's where this idea of being invited into friendship helps. Because at that time, every nation had their own God. And in order to, and you can't build a friendship if you only interact with someone in the midst of a large crowd or a large ballroom. It's not going to be a real in-depth friendship. At some point, you have to have that one-on-one time. And so God, in order to prepare us for this gift of friendship, had to call a people to himself and reveal himself in a particular way to Israel. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to distinguish the true God, the one God living and true, from the gods of all the other nations. And so it was a necessary step, but it was only a preparation. Because we heard in the gospel today, Jesus sends his apostles. He says, go to all nations and make disciples, baptizing them, teaching them. And so, yes, while there was this time when, in order to prepare us for friendship, God had to reveal himself in a particular way to the people of Israel, his desire was to gather all nations and again, in this idea of friendship. And then what else do we see with the Father and the Son in this feast of the Holy Trinity? What else do we see in our readings? So God revealed himself. We hear in our first reading, God revealed himself to the people of Israel, speaking through the fire and cloud, delivering them from the people of Israel, that this is a real God who's acted in our world. And then in the fullness of time, he sent his Son. And Jesus, the eternal Son of God, the eternal Son made flesh, revealed to us God's name. He taught us to call God Father, to recognize God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as we hear in the gospel today. Go and baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And then we give the gift of the Holy Spirit. You think about how there's that one sense in which, we have more in common with an ant than we do with God. We can't enter into a friendship with an ant. They don't have the capacity for it. There's something missing. And so if we're truly going to enter into friendship with God, he has to give us a gift. He has to give us the capacity. And for that, he sent the Holy Spirit at Pentecost to elevate us, to lift up our nature, so that living in the Spirit, we would have that capacity to know God, to love God on his own terms. And that's the gift of the Holy Spirit. You are invited in this friendship with God. We're invited to share in the life and love of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And consider this. If you're friends with someone, do you want to know what's going on with them? Do you want to learn more about them, or do you remain indifferent? And so when we have this invitation from the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit to live in friendship with them, are we going to remain indifferent to God and the things of God? Or will we have a desire to learn more about him, to learn more about his ways? Today we rejoice in the revelation of the most Holy Trinity, and that God has revealed himself to us and invites us into friendship with him.